We are the key masters of our own lives. Throughout our life, one of the things that we are going to be doing is crafting a key. But what does that mean exactly? And that is today's discussion on the Desert Viking. Now, there are two constant symbols in my life, or at least that I've used quite a bit. The first one is a labyrinth or an oubliette. The second one, which adorns my house in many places, is a key. And this key happens to sit on my work desk here. And this has several meanings, but a new one came to me over this past week. And I'm going to share with you what that key, that meaning is, another meaning, right? So part of walking this path is knowing that you know just enough to know that you don't really know anything. I think all of us need to be humble enough to realize that we really, truly know mostly nothing. No matter how many books we read or how many seminars we attend or how many lectures we give, we're just scratching the surface on cosmic knowledge in general, the objective truth, as it were. So I know enough to know that I know very little. But divine providence and things revealing themselves to me at the appropriate time has never stopped to astound me when it's happening and I realize it's happening around me. So before we get started, I wanted to give a thank you to someone. I received a letter in Lodge last week. I have not received a letter in 30 years. The last time I received a letter was, I was stationed in Korea. That was a long time ago, it's 30 years ago. And this individual, I received your letter here, and she responded to the your light has been diminished video that I did. Unfortunately, that video was shadow banned by YouTube, and I know that not from tinfoil hat, but I received a notice that video was shadow banned because they considered it political for some reason. Okay. I disagree. There was hardly anything to do with politics in there other than calling out both sides of the coin, but that's enough to get you shadow banned. So very few people saw that video. You can look at it if you go into my history. You can see it. It's still there. It's just that they won't serve it up to you on your own. So check that video out. I will leave a link in the comments below to it, and you can see my thoughts on what happens when they say your light has been diminished. But and she stays anonymous, so to Sister S, thank you for taking the time out of your day to write me a letter. I appreciate it very much, and you have my gratitude. Now, the Keymaster. What led to this certain video? As I have alluded to before, I try not to spam content. I'm not really interested in mass-producing content that starts to feel the same, or I'm just repeating myself over and over again. Right now, we're going to share some coffee together because it is the morning, and it's a very rare cloudy desert day, and it makes me miss greenery and storms because I don't know, it's been over a year now since we've had any meaningful storm, and I miss those. So we're going to have some coffee as we open my day here. Now, where did this originate from, the Keymaster? Well, the Keymaster, or this particular video, I just finished a book by John Michael Greer. It's his latest Kabbalah book. And while I thought it was a great book, he's a great author, so I recommend it, of course. A lot of it doesn't resound with me just simply because, and part of the subject matter of this video is, I was trained in Golden Dawn Kabbalah almost 30 years ago. So it's been something that I've used in my life for a few decades. And so because of that, I am kind of set in my ways. I try not to be. And that we call dogma, right? Where my way is the only way. And I know my way's not the only way, but as much as I can affirm that, as much as I can say that out loud, when something contradicts something that I think is the way it is, there are just walls that automatically go up. And that's what happened over the last couple of weeks. There was something that happened. We're gonna ease into that. Now, what is that exactly? I started my training. I started initiatory schools, as it were, over 30 years ago. So I was 15, and it was a Druidic circle. I started as a Druid. I grew up in western Pennsylvania, so there were a lot of woods. I grew up in a rural area on farms and whatnot. Those are my roots. And I've been around the world in several places since then. I live across the country now, of course, as everyone knows, in the blazing deserts of the of the country. So anyhow, I've learned quite a few different ways of doing things. And to start out, the very first thing that used to astound me, that I never could find a good answer for, was related to earth studies when they cast their circles and they have their ritual implements. And the knife, or the athame, was placed in the south, and that was actually originally how I was taught. In the Golden Dawn, the knife goes to the east. And I asked this question many times. Why? Why is that? Well, as we're going to discover, Gerald Gardner, who is pictured here, decided arbitrarily, and this is based off of an account I read years ago, and it wasn't even actually about this topic. It was just one of those things you stumble upon by accident, but it answered this question. Because I had this question, I carried this question for a long, long time. Over almost 30 years I asked this question, and no one could either answer it or would not answer it. There's one of those two you're going to get. They won't answer or can't answer. Most of it's can't, but some of it's won't. And the won't is because there is most of the things I know were not told to me. They were found through research, other than the basic foundational knowledge pieces, which you get through knowledge lectures and whatnot through these initiatory schools. And in that research I had done, I came across a book, and it talked about how Gardner decided to switch, because Gardner had a background in theurgy. So to Gardner, the athame, the knife, was in the east as well, and the sword was in the south. And he felt that the sword and the athame were basically the same thing from this source that I read. I obviously have never spoken to the man, so I'm going off of what I've read. Okay, caveat. And so he arbitrarily decided to switch it up. And this, of course, Gardner is the originator of 20th century earth studies, or Wicca, or that type of thing. So everyone just assumes that that's how it's supposed to be, not knowing that he arbitrarily switched it, because he felt that swords and athames were the same thing, so they should just go in the same direction. And whether you believe or agree with that is not the point. The point is that a guy arbitrarily swapped something in a ritual, and that became the new standard for his own reasons. Okay, so the next thing that happened that we're going to talk about, one of my friends contacted me a couple weeks ago, and she goes, "Make this make sense. The lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. We move in a clockwise manner. And yes, you face east, and then you face south, so you're moving in a clockwise manner. But it's called a banishing pentagram. You do not banish in a clockwise manner. You banish in a counterclockwise manner. This is known throughout earth studies and theurgy. If you're doing anything in ritual, and I hate to say this for those of you religious people who are getting really mad right now about talking about something like this, the Catholic Church and a few other churches, well, they have these similar rituals, and they follow the same rules. Cheers. But she was right. Clockwise is not banishment. Why is it called a banishment? I asked that same question for years and years. I was like, this does not make sense. How is it that moving clockwise is banishing anything? It's an invocation. And you'll actually see other people teach the LBRP, and they came to that same conclusion. So what they did was they reversed it, and they go in a counterclockwise manner. And some, one of our guys who was in the OTO, he said, "Yeah, that's legit too. That has a different meaning." Now, where did I find the answer to this particular problem? Well, again, arbitrarily, it came to me reading. And it had nothing to do, nothing was contrasting these two things. It happened through when I was studying something. Because I asked that question for a long time. And again, either they couldn't answer or wouldn't answer. And the answer, which I'm going to give you, which I read, was, well, it is an invocation. The lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram is an invocation. You are invoking the archangels into your space, and it is through their energies, through God, that the banishment occurs. So it's called a banishment, but it is not mechanically a banishment in terms of the directions you're moving. It's actually an invocation. But nowhere have I seen that contrasted in any writing. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm not saying that somewhere someone hasn't talked about this. I'm sure that they have. I just have never seen it. And I know it's a common enough question that I've had to answer before. So there's another one. Someone, and then online, or wherever, people have decided to show it counterclockwise because they came to the conclusion that clockwise wasn't a banishment, so they arbitrarily swapped it up. And so this can lead to frustration because we're looking for the master key. You're looking for the key that opens everything. Yet another one. This is actually the source right here. Okay, so this is the source. Let me move my camera a little bit so this is not hiding my face. There we go. This is the source of the video. Now, I've been working in Kabbalah for, again, over 30 years. I started with Golden Dawn teachings. And the Kabbalah has been an amazing roadmap for me to use for spiritual growth, and it can be used for a lot of other things as well. I've had a lot of misconceptions about the Kabbalah, mainly because when people write about these topics, they're writing as if things are a fact and in a certain tone, right? Like, this is how it is. And because I have read and studied and have been trained in knowledge lectures that this is how it is, it instilled dogma inside of me. Now, what I want you to pay attention with this particular graphic there are two things. The first is the shape of the tree of life. Okay, that's the one. That is what I call the standard or hermetic tree of life. It has other names. That's what I call it. And it's always important, I've mentioned this before, it's always important to go to where these things originate from. Where did this come from? This particular tree, as denoted by Aleister Crowley in an interview, Mathers and McGregor, when they were synthesizing their information from the cipher manuscripts, they did an amazing job at taking a bunch of esoteric ideas and making it into a body of work, a body of study, okay? But what they had to do is make some decisions. One of the decisions was, which tree do we use? Because yes, ladies and gentlemen, there are multiple trees of life that you will run into, and I ran into it, and I would always go, which one's the right one? That's the Hermetic tree, and it originates from a book called the Egypticus, written by a guy named Kirchner in the 1600s. The second thing, the catalyst to the video. If you notice, there are certain elements attributed to each of the four Kabbalistic worlds, the top being Atzulus. Now remember, Hebrew is read right to left, so Yod is the first world. Atzulus is the world of divinity. Bria is the world of creation. It is where the archangels are said to reside. Yetzirah is the world of formation, and is where the angelic choirs live, and this is where the buildings take place, the creation of the structures. And last, you have Asiya, which is the earth plane, which is where we live. Notice the elements are fire, water, air, earth. This is how I've always known it to be. After reading Greer's book, because the answers, funny enough, I started asking this. I asked this very question. I said, because what happened was, I'm studying several different correspondences, or so I'm under several different trainings right now. And the man I'm studying from most is a man named Jean Dubois. I study from him and Paul Foster Case. Those are my two primary schools right now. And Jean Dubois was a 20th century alchemist who died in, I believe, 2010. He's one of the last legit, people consider him legit alchemists. And in his version of the four worlds, it was actually fire, air, water, earth. And I saw that. And I immediately went, that's not right. And so I started asking questions. So I know a few people who are really, really good at this stuff. Asked them questions, and I got a bunch of different answers. I asked in the collegia, got some random answers. The best answer was, well, it depends on what lens you're using. So if you're approaching this from an alchemical sense, the Jean Dubois version is correct. If you're approaching it from a creation standpoint, then the Golden Dawn version is correct. I'm like, okay, I get it. Kind of, but where did it come from? Like, why did we just choose to do that? Grandmaster Timothy Hogan responded, said, well, it has to do with the Airy configuration. It's a different configuration of the Tree of Life, which is right here. And in the Airy configuration, there are three mother letters in the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, Mem, and Shin, which Aleph is air, Mem is water, and Shin is fire. And he said, based off of that order on the tree here, because Shin is the first, or supposed to be the first, and then air is second, and Mem is down the bottom. And that is why. I was like, okay, that makes sense if you're using the Airy configuration, but very few people use the Airy configuration. Now, this is my personal favorite of all the templated configurations of the Tree of Life, because it just makes the most sense. And in his book, in Tim Hogan's book, he goes over the Kabbalah, his book on the Kabbalah and his book on the elements, and he talks about this. And this is what illuminated me to the fact there were multiple trees, right? And I used to ask that question, which tree is correct? And now, based off the studies from a couple weeks ago, why are the world's elements swapped around? Oh my, what do I do? Because they're all different, right? It's like it seems so arbitrary. Because someone just moved them around or decided, well, this is the configuration of the tree I'm using, and this is the order of the elements. Interestingly enough, the next book I would pick up would be Greer's book on the Kabbalah, his newest one. And he answers all of those questions explicitly. He's the first person to answer them explicitly. And the thing is, I already knew all these answers. It's just that I don't know. Like I said, I've been working in this for 30 years, so you get very rigid and, well, no, it's got to be this thing. The thing is with the Tree of Life, you're going to come across multiple configurations. And I used to ask literally for years and years and years and years, which tree is correct, and no one could or would answer me. And then it dawned on me one day several years ago. Multiple trees are legit. Look out in the forest. I believe that's what the meditation I had done referred to me. Look out in the forest. The trees are all different. So too are the trees of life. Each of you is a tree of life. Dion Fortune says it very well. The spheres, of which there are 10, are objective, but the paths are subjective, meaning they can be in different geometrical configurations, and they can have different letters associated with them, and they can have different tarot representations associated with them. Greer even goes so far as to have a chart in his book that shows 4 different tarot configurations. And he says these all work just fine, but they contradict each other. They're all different. So which one is correct? The answer is all of them are correct. It just depends on which one resonates the best with you. And his example showed Golden Dawn. His example showed A.E. White and a couple other major names. So these weren't like arbitrary people that were just random. Like these were well-respected individuals. He then goes further in saying that the associations, these sphere auth are archetypes. They represent an idea or an archetype, but their names that they were given, Those were Jewish names given, which we're going to talk about in a minute. They can be swapped out. And in his system, the thing that doesn't resonate with me very much, but is technically, I think, correct, is he swaps these names out with what he was taught. They mean the same basic things, but they're totally different names. And it's just as right, because the spheres are objective, but the paths can be subjective. So all that answered my questions, or reaffirmed my questions. The last being that the Jewish portion of the Kabbalah, it is assumed by many that Kabbalah is a Jewish invention, and it is not. And there are several scholarly texts to back that up. The Jewish people were heavily influenced by the Gnostics of southern France in the 11th century. Those would be, I imagine, the Bogomils, who were the predecessors of the Cathars. And through the Gnostic ideas and teachings, they formulated their own version of the Kabbalah. Now, the Tree of Life can be found as far back as the 2nd century by a man named Celsus in his work against the Christians. He was I believe he was a middle Platonist. And so there were, back then in the 2nd century, there were, the Christianity was at war with itself, and then that was also at war with the Platonists and all the other schools of philosophy. So there was a big back and forth back then. But there's a proto-image of the Tree of Life, which is not Jewish. And that all, of course, goes back to the days of Plato. And that can be stemmed back even further to roughly the 6th century BC to Pythagoras, who is the wellspring of Western esotericism. Pythagoras. All roads lead to Pythagoras. If you can find the connection to Pythagoras in anything you're studying, you're doing really well, because now you're seeing how things mutate and change. And you're going to get a wider view of the truth, other than a guru told you this, but where did the guru get it? So Pythagoras is the beginning. And Pythagoras studied in Egypt for 22 years and was initiated into the Egyptian mysteries. That is the connection between Western esotericism and the Egyptian mysteries, is Pythagoras. Now, to answer my last question, the question that caused all this. Dubois says that the worlds were fire, air, water, and earth. Now, it's nice knowing that there are different versions and that those are acceptable. It's even nicer to know where he got fire, air, water, and earth from, other than he randomly, arbitrarily created it, because I have a hard time with arbitrary creations. Now, granted, everything is arbitrary, right? Somewhere, some Greek philosopher made this image you're looking at here arbitrarily, right? He put it together. You can say by divine influence or not, but some guy put pen to paper and made an idea. So I get everything is arbitrary at some point. But the Greeks revered the numbers 1 through 9. There are only 10 numbers total, right? So Pythagoras and Plato and all them were big on geometry, big on numbers in general. Mathematics is the language of the divinity. It is how the divinity is expressed. Now, if you are into, if you're a Freemason, which part of my target audience here would be esoteric Freemasons, we're very well versed on the 7 liberal arts, of which much of the world ignores today. The 7 liberal arts are not just for Freemasons. The 7 liberal arts are composed of 2 shapes, the trivium, which is a triangle, and the quadrivium, which is a square sitting on top of it. Now, I want you to think of that image for a moment. And again, we're going to go over what the trivium and the quadrivium are. The quadrivium deals with math. The trivium is how you are able to first express yourself through the written word, grammar. It is then your ability to process what you are reading or receiving and discerning what is apt to be fact versus fiction. And that would be logic, taught in philosophy schools. And the last is your ability to communicate what you know to convince others of your thoughts, and that is rhetoric. That is what is called the trivium. That is the basis upon which all education should be founded on, and we got rid of it out of our schools long ago. As evidenced today, just take a walk through social media, and you'll see just how badly we need the trivium brought back. And I believe every human has the capability of achieving the trivium. It's just that they don't see a need. There's no material need gain to that. In fact, the stupider people are, the easier it is to grift them. The easier it is to swindle them out of their resources and keep them as their primary use today, which is we are batteries to generate wealth for wealthy people. And then when our use is done, we're thrown in the garbage. You can't do that to a population that is well versed in the trivium. Now, that leads us to the quadrivium, the last four of the 7 liberal arts. The first one is arithmetic. That is just the concept of numbers and learning numbers. Numbers are the divine language. The 5th of those is geometry. Geometry is, to a Freemason, very important. In my opinion, though, all 4 of these elements of the quadrivium are equally important, not just geometry. Now, geometry is mathematics expressed in a physical form that you can see, like what you're looking at on the screen here. That is the tetracatus. I probably pronounced that wrong. The tetracatus is the 10 numbers put into physical form. If you notice, there are 10 spheres there, and it's the numbers 1 through 4. 1 through 4. The next of the liberal arts was music, which is mathematics in an audio form to the ear. This is where the concept of tonal distance comes into place. This is where music's theory comes into place. It's all numbers. It's all mathematics and vibrational values. And the last is astronomy, which is mathematics on a cosmic scale. All of those are equally important. To the Greeks, numbers were divine. To modern man, to us today, numbers are just the numbers in our bank account or other quantity things that say how much of something, and that's it. It's very materialistic. To the Greeks, numbers were spiritual. And the numbers 1 through 9 all have specific meanings. And the number 10 is simply the number 1 started over again. Because 9 is the end. 10 is a new beginning. Therefore, when you think of the tree of life, numbered 1 through 10 Sephiroth, there's a reason for that. There's a reason there's not 9, and there's a reason there's not 11. Now, the Tetrarchus was divided into the 4 elements, and those 4 elements were fire, air, water, earth. That is where Jean Dubois associated the 4 elements to his Kabbalistic worlds. He's following the Greeks, which, now that I know that, I probably agree with that more. The Golden Dawn version just fits better symbolically because the Tetragrammaton only has 3 letters, 3 unique letters, or 4 letters, but they're 3 unique. The letter He is there twice. And so what the Golden Dawn did, what Mathers did, arbitrarily, probably, is they said, well, it makes more sense to make this letter, which exists twice, let's make that the water, the female elements, water and earth. And now it just fits. And that worked great. And that's kind of probably how, in my opinion, that's how that got set up. And it works just fine. So all those systems work just fine, but Divine Providence had it that I picked up a book that answered a lot of my questions for me, explicitly. And I asked several teachers that I consider masters, and none of them gave me that answer. I got some okay answers. One did say, well, yeah, it's kind of arbitrary. You have to pick what resounds with you. But that is the lesson, right? That is the lesson today. So that comes back to the Keymaster and coming back full circle. So the past couple weeks have been questions regarding things that could be arbitrarily changed. They have different meanings. Why do they have different meanings? And Greer sums it up. I'm going to steal this quote from him in his book. And this is where I've had this key, and I've had the keys in my house since I was an adult. Some of these were from, actually one of these keys in my house comes from a yard sale back when I was in high school. I was always attracted to keys. But this quote of Greer's fit so well that it added a new little facet to my key. And I want to share that with you. And that quote in his book was this: "We want to find the one key that opens up every house, the objective truth," right? The one truth to rule them all. But the answer is, there is no one objective truth. That we have to create our own key, because each house is only opened by its key. And that means my key is not your key. And your key is not someone else's key. We are the Keymaster. We are going to craft our own key. But our paths are all going to be different, and our keys are all going to be different. The versions of the Kabbalah you may resound with may not be what mine are. You may not like the version of the LBRP that I use. So you might want to go counterclockwise because it makes more sense to you. And you know what? It probably works the same. One of our other guys, he doesn't use the LBRP at all. He likes to use Greer's methods, which is a sphere of protection. Does the same basic thing. Yet another of our guys, he doesn't use any type of ritual. He says he just does it mentally. The Priory Commander of the Templars here, he does no rituals at all. He has a background in much in terms of theology, and he says his faith in God and his knowledge of who he is as a human is enough where he does not need symbols. He just knows his place in the hierarchy, and that things like elementals, etc., are beneath us in terms of the power hierarchy, and we can banish them at will. But some of us like our rituals. And there are many other versions of the LBRP, and I'm not trying to get into a topic on the LBRP. It's just one example. Your version may be different. The only time that matters is if you're working in a group, because the group is going to have one way of doing things. And in that group work, you have to be able to conform. Otherwise, you're building your own temple, and your temple is going to be different than mine, and the key you construct is going to be different than mine. But our houses all lead to the same knowledge, ultimately. But there is no one objective key. And searching for the one objective key, in my opinion, is folly. And the Hermetic principles teach us that, especially when we start looking at the principle of duality, hot and cold, love and hate, the opposites. The Greeks had a chart of opposites, Pythagorean opposites, which basically said, these are the same thing. So if I pull back this image here, this is showing the number one, the monad, is unity. And unity is the arcanum. We are moving towards unity. And that means hot, cold, love, hate, all these opposites that exist, be unified into one. The black and white squares of the tiled floor, good and evil, all of those things. Those are extreme ends of a pole, and we need to unify all of those into the monad, as taught by the Greeks through geometry. That's about all I have for today. Again, thank you, Sister S, for your letter that you wrote me. I appreciate that. For the rest of you, and Sister S, if you're watching this one as well, if you have any comments on the Keymaster, on dogmatic paths, on forging your own path, I would love to hear your comments in the comments section. Please leave them below. If you feel the need, if you think that this is worthy content, please give it a like for the algorithm. Otherwise, they shadow ban it and no one ever sees it. And subscribe if you feel so inclined. Otherwise, that's all I have for you today. I am going to go out and enjoy a very rare cloudy desert day and continue my studies on this day. And so I hope you have a safe and fruitful and knowledge-filled rest of the time until I see you again. And until then, we'll see you then.